probably felt better than I did before the surgery. So I called my friend to say thank you. And then when I did, she was like, oh, so this silly thing called meditation worked for you, huh? I said, yes. And then she said, well, I think you owe me some yoga. And then I committed to 3 private yoga lessons. And that's how this whole thing started.
Right. Now, I want us to go back to the PTSD. Many times, looking from outside, the rest of us would be tempted to tell a soldier, why don't you just focus on happier things and be a happier person? What are these soldiers going through having been in that same position?
Right, so PTSD, it's one, you can't control it. I tell the people to help explain it, PTSD is a very normal reaction to a very abnormal situation. It's not normal to be in combat. It's not normal to be getting shot at by a bunch of people. It's not normal to have to shoot back. It's not what we want to do as people. We want to help people. And then when you're in a situation where you're standing up for something you believe in and you're fighting to protect your family at home, you have to do those things. So in those situations where it's very dangerous, your brain, being amazing, tells you, okay, to stay alive, I have to say that being around a group of people is threatening. To stay alive, that my back to an open door is not safe, because somebody might come through there and try to hurt me. So those things are very normal. And then what happens is when we go home, and we're not in those situations anymore, your brain doesn't know the difference. So all of a sudden, when your family and friends are so happy to see you, but there's a large number of people, you start to get into the panic mode and you start to relive and re-experience the negative things of combat. And those things take a toll. It keeps you from connection to the people that you love because they're saying, what's wrong with you? Or how you're so different. And you don't want to go out as much. And perhaps you're living with guilt from something that you had to do or something that you didn't do that you should have. And those things just over time tend to just erode who you are. And left untreated, it winds up in suicide a lot of times.
Right. Now tell us about the day that changed your life, basically, that day when that explosion took place in Iraq, because many times when soldiers go out, other than PTSD, they also have permanent deformities. You ended up being a double amputee.
Right. 1
minute you're a fully functioning, strong person, and the next minute you have to learn everything all over again. So just tell us about that.
Sure, yeah. When I remember it was a little over 11 years ago, we were headed out for a combat mission, and it was November 10th, 2004. And we were responding to intelligence that some of the insurgency was leaving Fallujah to come attack our base. So, like the fighting force we decided to meet the enemy where they were. And then when we were headed out for that mission, like it just started. It was 4 o'clock in the morning, it was pitch black outside, and I was in the back seat of our Humvee, our military vehicle, and I remember bouncing carefully down this really pitiful road in complete silence and complete darkness. And my head was bowed in prayer like it was before every mission. And then, boom, just the ground opened up under us and it sent my 18,000-pound vehicle about 6 feet in the air in a giant ball of fire. And then my eyes were closed in that prayer. And then I remember when I opened my eyes, I realized that I was ejected from the vehicle, but my legs remained caught in the twisted and burning metal that used to be the floorboard and undercarriage of that truck. And I remember as the dust started to settle, I could see a little bit more now because my truck was on fire. And then I looked forward to the driver's compartment, and then I saw my good friend, Sergeant First Class Mike Annalini, had made the ultimate sacrifice. He didn't make it. It was quite obvious. And that's what I wear this bracelet for every day. And this bracelet just reminds me that some people don't have the chance to live. And that, so what's my excuse for not living?
Right.
And I remember seeing Mike and realizing I was hurt really bad, but I didn't really understand how serious yet. So I started to check myself out, and we're trained to start with our head because it's the most important part. And my helmet came apart in 2 pieces in my hand, and I knew that wasn't good. But I was conscious, and that's a good thing when everyone else was killed or knocked out cold. And I started to check myself, my arms, my torso, and when I reached up for my legs, because I'm laying on the ground in the dirt, but my legs are still caught in the vehicle, connected, but caught. And when I reached up, that's when I felt the unmistakable arterial blood spurt with every beat of my heart. And I knew that I was going to die.
Right.
Making my peace with God, saying goodbye to my wife and my daughter, and I was giving up, really. And as I sat there losing what seemed like all of my blood, I remember thinking, they say when you're going to die that your life flashes before your eyes. And that wasn't my experience. For me, I saw all the things I hadn't yet done. And the last one I remember, as I'm literally dying, was my daughter, who was 10 at the time, dressed in white, walking down the aisle without her dad. And I just remember being shocked, and I woke up and said, like, Dan, I'm alive, I have to do something. So I put my hand in the wound and trying to find the artery and stop the bleeding, and thought I was just going to pinch it off and be like, I'm fine, but that's not how it went. And I shoved my hand in there and pressed and prayed that it would give enough time for the medic to arrive.
Right.
And then the medic showed up. I had a tourniquet on my leg, an IV in my arm, and my whole team came to remove my legs from my truck that was still on fire. And then I was put in a helicopter and off for my first surgery in a hospital tent in Iraq.
And I understand from one of your videos, one of the hospital nurses said something to you when you woke up.
Yeah.
What was that?
Right, I remember right when I woke up, her face was right in mine, and she said something I'll never forget, and I will never forget her face, and I'll probably never know her name. She said, Sergeant Nevins, you're a very lucky man. We managed to repair your femoral artery. We had to take your left leg below the knee. We managed to save your right one for now, but you'll probably lose that one too. And then right about the time I was going to wake up or like come to my senses and feel sorry for myself and all those things that we would do, I looked up and my whole team was standing on the wall of the tent, and my family, waiting for me to wake up. And then I remember we laughed, we told stories. I made a joke about returning the roller skates I got for Christmas, and I did not get roller skates for Christmas, but that pain medicine was really good. And yeah, I remember sharing stories. We talked about Mike, and we shed a few tears together, and then I fell asleep.
Right.
And woke up the next day in Germany at an Army Medical Center where I'd spend the next 7 days with surgery every day.
Yeah, you've gone through about 36 surgeries, more than that.
36.
How was it adjusting to life as a double amputee, which took place, your second leg was amputated a bit,
Yeah, 3 years later.
Tell us about that.
It was really difficult to adjust. First, because I had one prosthetic leg that I was learning to use, but then my other leg was still mine, and all these different surgeries, it didn't work well, it didn't function that well, and it was an incredible amount of pain every day. So not only did I have these invisible wounds that were painful that I was learning to deal with, I had real physical wounds that were painful. And then I'm learning to walk, and every step is either completely new or completely painful. And I didn't think that my life was going to be normal again, let alone good, and let alone not, like right now I think my life is great. And it was a long road, almost, so it was 20 months in the hospital for the first time, waiting for this leg to heal. And yeah, I didn't think, I used to be a soldier. I was a leader of men in combat. There's no more significant honor than that as a man, as a warrior, is to lead other men. And that's where I was, the day before, and then now I was stuck in a hospital bed. I was broken. I was useless. I didn't have a purpose. I didn't have my team, my Army family there with me, and I was alone. And it was hard. It was a lot of painful rehabilitation and painful coming to grips with, I used to be this man who was into all the sports and doing everything, and now I'm this man, which is not the same.
Right, and it's a very touching story. Now, a few months ago, the Kenya Defense Forces in Somalia had their base overrun by Al-Shabaab militia, and many of them, they went through the same experience, traumatic amputations, and many other soldiers as well in the country, as well as AMISOM forces in Africa. What would you say to those soldiers that are now nursing such serious wounds, thinking, what else am I going to do with my life?
I would say to those soldiers, and I hope I get a chance to meet one or some of them while I'm here in Kenya, is to say that don't listen to yourself now. Because the now, and when you're so recently removed from that traumatic situation and then the pain and all the things in recovery, your brain is telling you you'll never be the same.
Right.
Your brain is telling you that this is horrible, and I used to be this physically fit person, and now I'm either wounded, missing a leg, I got shot, whatever it was, whether it's a gunshot wound or an explosion or just the wounds you don't see. They feel changed and different. And so I would tell them to say, don't listen to yourself, because what's left for the rest of your life is a choice.
Now, the wounds that we don't see, I would say are the most important, the most hurting wounds. Physical scars will heal. What can they do to cope with what they're going through inside? Because they can't really open up to the rest of us who don't understand what it is like being in combat.
I'd say the first steps for someone injured in combat to heal from the invisible wounds is to not be afraid to talk about it. To admit that, hey, I'm worried about what the rest of my life is going to be like. I have guilt over this situation. And when they can share, and I'd say to start sharing just with each other, because they were there. So when you're sharing with someone that has very similar experiences to you, you know that they understand. And if they can do that, and I get, as a guy, you don't want to do that. It feels like you're admitting some sort of weakness. It feels like you're saying that I wasn't ready, or I wasn't man enough, and I get that, because I was that guy. But there's real power in learning to share and relive the experience, because when these traumatic experiences happen, you experience them in a way, and you have an opinion about them. This was horrible, or that went wrong. And then those feelings become how you feel about that situation for the rest of your life. Unless you can later, when you're a little more healed and a little better off, talk about them again and relive them, actually how it happened. And then with that, you can choose to say, okay, that's what happened, and now I'm going to give up the negative feelings I have about it. So instead of being this negative, horrible experience, they just become a memory. And a memory with no emotional charge, whether it was good, bad, or ugly, whatever they feel. And then once they can get in that place, like I would say, do some yoga. Yeah, learn to just meditate and be still and give, because it's really all in our, people say when you're scared, it's all in your head.
Right.
And it's an easy thing to say, but it's also very true. Our brains, we don't even understand all of our brains. And if we just give our brain time to not think about the past and not worry about the future and only concentrate on what's happening right now, it gives our brain a chance to settle in, reassess the situation. Okay, so I'm no longer in combat. I can let go of some of these protocols that I've built to respond to threats. And one of the best ways to do that, I've found, is yoga. Because I practice Baptiste power yoga.
Right.
And it's hard. It's the most strenuous exercise I feel that I've ever done, which surprised me, because I've done so many different types of sports and so many different types of workouts. And when you're struggling so hard on your yoga mat and listening to a guy like me tell you to put your hand down and your other hand up and push your hips up to the sky, you're so busy thinking about your body and like, this is happening right now and my muscles are giving out and I feel like I'm sweating and I didn't think yoga was this hard.
You have no time for other things.
No time to think.
Right. And I mean, we'll talk about your yoga journey in just a bit. We're speaking to Dan Nevins, former retired Army sergeant who is now a certified yoga instructor on the healing power of yoga. And this conversation is especially important for soldiers coming back from war, many of whom deal with post-traumatic stress disorder and having pictures of war and memories of war playing back in their minds. If you would wish to speak to us, ask any question to Dan Nevins, give him any comments, do call in to to us. The numbers will be on your screen in just a moment. Also interact with us on Twitter at KTN Kenya, at Michelle Ngele under the hashtag Weekend Express. So let's go to that yoga now.
Okay.
You've been quoted saying that you were meant to lose your legs.
Yes.
At some point, because yoga gave you that connection to the world again. Tell us about that for you.
Yeah, it's the weirdest thing to say that I was supposed to lose my legs. And so I'll start by saying that what I mean by that is every day when I wake up now, I know that I'm doing exactly what I was meant to do. I was meant to share yoga with people because I've been able to help people understand and heal from combat stress. So it was, it's crazy to think of that. But I remember my first yoga class, I committed to 3 private lessons. And so I have these new prosthetic legs. And I'm learning to do yoga. So my yoga teacher was teaching me like my legs were real. And she was putting me in these poses and saying things like root down, connect to the earth, and rise up. And it didn't make any sense to me. And my legs were spread open and my prosthetic is like jamming into the back of my leg and it's painful and my legs are twisting inside of this prosthetic and it was miserable. It was the worst experience of my entire life. And well, I don't want to say my entire life. There's been a couple days that have been a little worse, but it was especially hard because we have this saying in the military called your man card, right? Like, so I had to give up my man card.
Wear spandex?
Yes, wear spandex. Yeah. Twice that day, right? Twice. First for trying yoga, which I never imagined. And then the second because I was horrible at it.
Right.
And I wasn't used to being bad at things. So it was hard for me. And I went home and I'm never going to do this again. And then I remembered I made a commitment to 3 classes. And a commitment is a commitment, so I showed up for my second one. And I remember I was so frustrated. Halfway through, I looked at my teacher and I said, "Can I just take my legs off?" And she looked at me and was like, "Okay, we'll figure it out." And why that's so shocking is that no one got to see me with my legs off. My legs used to be the best part of my body. If you ask someone, what's the best part of your body? Like my eyes, my smile, and for me it was my legs. And when they were gone, that was a lot to learn to live with. And then I watched my muscular legs deteriorate, and what was left of my lower leg just got so small, and there were scars everywhere, and half of my thigh was gone. And when I was in the hospital, it was held together with what looked like piano wire. It was an impossible situation. So for me to address that shame and just take my legs off, like I didn't even believe it was happening. But then I remember getting on my yoga mat and she's behind me and there's a pose in yoga called Warrior One, Virabhadrasana One. And I remember settling in and she's behind me looking at me and I'm just trying to figure out how am I going to do this. And as I'm getting ready to get into this pose, I remember I was replaying what she said. She said, root down and rise up. So I imagined just connecting down to the earth. And as I went to lift my arms up in the air, what the pose calls for, the earth just sent this incredible jolt of energy in my body, like being struck by lightning. I would imagine, I've never been struck by lightning, thank God, but no pain, just this electricity and power. And I literally lit up. It felt like I was exploding from the inside, and I lifted my arms up. Tears were coming out of my eyes. Meanwhile, my yoga teacher has no idea what's happening. She's probably thinking, how am I going to tell him to move his legs?
Right.
And I'm having this amazing breakthrough, which is weird for me to say because as a guy, like I didn't think that was the earth, energy from the earth. Like what? But it was like the earth was saying to me, Dan, where have you been? It's like 10 years I've been waiting for you to come back.
Right.
And it was powerful. And then I got it. And then what I learned later as I look back at it is that missing connection to the earth, like this thing, we're all standing on it, right? Every day we take it for granted. But because I'm connected to the earth, and you're connected to the earth, and I'm connected to you. And whether I'm standing in the United States and you're here in Kenya, yeah, we're still connected.
On the same earth.
And that missing connection from me to this planet was keeping me from connection to everyone else around me.
Right.
And I got really excited about it, and I learned to modify all these different poses. So like when I do a yoga pose, it looks different than like if you did a yoga pose.
You're that good. That's what you're saying.
No, it's different. It's different because it doesn't look the same.
Right.
Our shapes are different. And so I learned to let go and just be.
Okay. Now, a decade later, yoga has changed your life. You are now a certified yoga instructor. But you say your post-traumatic, your brain injury, the traumatic brain injury has not completely subsided.
No.
So how is it? Is it something you're going to live with for the rest of your life? Or is it something you're still battling? Or is it something you just have to come to a point of acceptance for?
With a traumatic brain injury, there's different types. So there's penetrating, which means like something went into your brain. Thank God that wasn't it. Mine was from the concussive blast. And the blast that sent me home from combat was not my first. And so there's been repeat incidents. So that changes your brain and actually kills part of your brain. And so early on, it was really bad. And today, it's much better, but it's still present. And I've learned to live with it. We say that you don't suffer from a brain injury, you're living with a brain injury. But the great news is our brain, like I said, is so amazing, it learns to heal. And those places where I lost a lot of memories, I have those back because my brain learned to work around the parts of it that weren't functioning anymore. And every day is better and better, but I'm sure it'll always be there. Sometimes my sense of smell goes out, which is really great around my friends sometimes. And sometimes I struggle with names, which names are really important to me, to call someone by their name. And so when that's gone and I'm searching, and it could be somebody that I grew up with, I've known them my whole life, and I'm looking at them and like, I can tell you where you're from and all your favorite color, what you like to eat, but no idea what your name is. And then sometimes it works.
Right. Even as you do yoga, of course, you're no longer practicing. Do you feel that allegiance, that sense of I'm still a soldier?
Absolutely. Yeah, being a soldier is, I'll always look back at some of the most important things I've ever did. So it's hard to equate the significance of that, especially when you're doing things that you really believe in, you feel are important, like trying to help other parts of the world be better, or to help. When we were in combat in Iraq, it was less about fighting and more about bringing clean drinking water and more about improving roads, and then we'd have to fight sometimes to protect these things that are happening. And so that it's hard to let go of how great that was and how important that work is. And even though now I'm completely moved past that and I'm on a different chapter of my life, I still feel like a soldier. And I think it's that same protective instinct that makes me need to teach yoga. Just like I was sharing my willingness to protect with other people, it's like I'm sharing this really important thing of what I've learned with people. And what's great is like I want to help veterans because that's my family. But I've learned that we all live with the invisible wounds of the wars that we fight, whether that's a traditional war or whether that's a family war or maybe about our childhood or whatever. We all live with those. We all have our silent struggles. And yoga works for all of those.
Right. Okay. Now, I want us to move to how the families and the people close to you felt and what they were going through during that time. But before we do that, this wasn't the first time. The explosion that you had in Iraq wasn't your first, you said?
No.
So soldiers who have not been injured in combat, some of them still have PTSD.
Yes.
And then there are moments when they have to be redeployed.
Yeah.
And they still have the PTSD. Have you experienced that, and how is that situation?
I see that all the time. Being in the United States with multiple people are sometimes on their 10th deployment. So they came back physically fine. And it's two things, because PTSD when you're home is when it's a struggle.
Right.
When you're back serving, it serves you really well. So it's hard to kind of equate it. So I found that a lot of people, so when I got home, I self-medicated from PTSD with achievement, climbing mountains, riding my bike, playing sports. A lot of people today, they self-medicate with redeployment because it's, okay, if I can just go back to where life was so much simpler when my job was to stay alive and keep my friends alive, then yeah, this works.
Right.
And then when it's coming home, that's when it's hard. So if there's ever a day, hopefully, that there's no more war, no more fighting to be done, that's when the healing needs to happen. So for soldiers who have to redeploy, it's almost like you live into what your brain is telling you is you should be afraid of or should be protecting against. But it's funny that people focus so much on the warriors, especially in the United States. Oh, this poor soldier and what he has to do. But then it's like you said, there's a whole family at home.
Friends, yes.
Family, friends, just they're worried about you. And I know every day when I was in combat, every day I knew what I had to do. I knew where I was going, what my mission was. But the people at home, they don't know. They're worried about my safety every day. I remember when I was married when I was in war, not anymore. So I remember asking my wife what it was like for her when she found out that I was hurt. And I remember her telling me the story that the Army officials, they called her and they asked for her by her full name, which when someone does that, you know it's not good news. They said, "May I speak to Nicole Disher Nevins?" And she said, "This is me." And then she knew. And then she told me, she said, all I could scream into the phone was, "Is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead?" And they tried to calm her fears, but she wasn't having it. And she just relayed this whole thing to me, like all this anxiety and all these fears, because while I had this luxury of focusing on the mission and keeping my friends alive, it's kind of hard, it seems hard, but it's really simple. Meanwhile, she was at home worrying about me every single day, and then she got the call. And she actually didn't believe them when she said, "No, he's alive, but he's in surgery." She didn't believe it. She thought I was either killed or captured. And yeah, I wouldn't want to trade places with her. Even going through what I went through, it's so much harder when it's someone you love who's being hurt. And you have families and friends at home worried, like for the soldiers that come back injured. So they're just focused on getting better, and their family has to watch that and see their sadness and see their pain and try to be there for them, and then they could possibly be resisting the help. It's a really tough situation for everyone. And yeah, it's something that we as people, like when we're not in it, that we just don't see. And it's important that we recognize that.
Right. Now, as we wind up, what's your message to these soldiers, especially because you're trying to spread the message of yoga, that yoga gives peace. How are you going to encourage them, or at least convince them to try yoga? Yeah,
so I'd say to them, I get it. It sounds like really funny and really strange and something that you wouldn't consider. It's not something for a man to do, but it works. And sometimes it's the real growth in being a human being and being a man is to admit that you don't have all the answers. And to realize that when you're in a place and nothing seems to be working, that why not try something new? And I would say that yoga is not what a lot of people think it is. It's certainly not what I thought it was. I thought it was some weird religion and some like crazy. No, it's not any of that. It's a really great exercise for your body, for your mind, and for your relationships. And those things are the most important.
All right. Dan Nevins, everybody, speaking to us on the healing power of yoga. He will be teaching a yoga class at 10 a.m. for those who are in Nairobi. Just tell us a bit more about that class and who can come. Is it free for everybody? It
is a donation-based class, so whether you can't afford to donate anything or if you want to donate what you're able, you can come to the Shine Center here in Nairobi and take class.
Right.
And it happens every Saturday, but this is my Saturday. And we're going to make it absolutely amazing for all those that show up.
Okay. Absolutely. So if you want to show up for that, do make time at 10 a.m. Dan Nevins will be teaching yoga, and that has been an interesting conversation on the healing power of yoga, especially important for soldiers who come back from war, for them to heal both the visible and the invisible scars of war. Thank you so much for staying with us on the Weekend Express. My name is Michelle Ngele. Good morning.